like to welcome you today to today's telecast of True Hope for Today. We'll be continuing our study on the book of James, and we're moving right along, I think. We are in chapter 4, and there's 5 chapters. So we've been on this for a few months, but I think it's been a good study, and I hope you're really getting something out of this study. So today we will begin with verse 15 of chapter 4 of the book of James. And it reads, "Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that." You know, if you're ever talking to someone about future plans like traveling, starting a business, etc., and they say, "I'll be doing that, the Lord willing," they're obeying this particular verse of the Bible instead of speaking as if their plans are certain. You know, they're willing to acknowledge that God is sovereign, and our decisions and hopes are based solely on His allowance of them coming to completion. You know, this attitude does several things. First, it rightly includes credit to the Lord for achievements in our life. Second, it removes from us the stain of failure should our plans not come to fruition. And thirdly, it keeps us living in the Spirit because we're ever conscious of His guiding power in all matters. You know, as God allows or restrains the intentions of the wicked, how can we expect to land safely at the next airport without the Lord's protection? As God is in control of the natural forces, how can we expect to climb a mountain during an earthquake? As God is in control of our very heartbeat and breath, how can we make plans to see our children's marriage apart from His allowance of it? As God likewise controls the lives of others, how can we expect even one more visit from our father or mother? Every moment is precious, and every moment is controlled completely by Him. Therefore, whatever we plan, it should be with the understanding that it is only if the Lord is willing to allow it to occur. Verse 16 says, "As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil." Why is boasting or bragging evil? You know, think it through and you'll see. If a woman is exceptionally lovely, wasn't it a gift of her birth? What if she highlights herself to look beautiful? Then isn't this temporary and false? If someone is a natural musician, how can they brag about what they were born with? Suppose they worked hard to become a musician because they lacked natural talent. Where did the drive to learn their skill come from? If you were born into a wealthy family, what did you do to deserve it? But what if you became wealthy by playing the lottery? Wasn't this providence and beyond yourself? Or what if you worked hard and made great wealth? Again, where did the ability, time, and circumstance come from to allow you to become rich? You know, it doesn't matter what the issue, what the circumstance, or what the possession, it all ultimately came from one source, the Creator. Likewise, each breath we take is from His goodness to us. Every heartbeat is ultimately under His control. If you don't believe this, then go back and watch videos of a 9/11 attack, or click on any of a host of YouTube videos that caught death in the act. None of those people expected what was coming, and their plans for the next moment were in vain. Now, how much more tenuous are our long-term plans? Each moment is precious, and every sunrise is a gift. Don't squander your life pursuing the wind, but instead consider Solomon's sound advice. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. From this, Solomon goes on to pouring out the many ways death arrives. Now, is this the time of God's favor? Remember him now. Verse 17 says, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. Sin can be divided up in multiple ways, but the three main categories of all sin are sins of commission, sins of omission, and sins of the mind. We often focus on sins of commission, things that we actually do wrong, like stealing, adultery, lying, etc. These make for great sermons and are what the law is mostly based on. The majority of the Ten Commandments are things we're told not to do, to not lie, for example. When we do, we commit a sin of commission. Sins of the mind are good to use when witnessing to others. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Our thoughts reveal corrupt nature and show us how far we really are from holiness. Even if we don't actually commit adultery or murder, our intent condemns us. The commandment, do not covet, falls under this category. The third type of sin, which is of omission, is no less wrong and covers a vast part of sin in our lives. We know we should do something that is morally right to do it, and yet we make excuses to avoid doing it. James says that when this occurs, it is sin. What does all this tell us? That we really, really need Jesus. We may not have committed adultery, but we sure have thought about it. We may have not stolen, but we failed to stop the person accompanying us when they stole. Such sins separate us from God, and only Jesus can restore us. Praise the Lord for Jesus. We're moving into chapter 5 now, and verse 1 reads, Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of a misery that is coming on you. One of the great mistakes of our society, and one from which Christians are not immune, is to make assumptions based upon wealth. God favors me because I'm rich. I am important because I'm rich. My wealth will save me during times of crisis. On today's TV, there are a host of companies and commercials which speak of the security of gold. But when the ball drops and the economy collapses, that gold will be useless, just as it was in Ezekiel's time. They will throw their silver into the streets, and their gold will be treated as a thing unclean. Their silver and gold will not be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath. I will not satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs, for it has caused them to stumble into sin. That's Ezekiel 7, verse 19. What is the time of the Lord's wrath? Read the terrifying words of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. Words so appalling that despite the gruesome TV we sit and watch each Halloween, those shows can't even compare to the reality of God's wrath. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot, will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter the afterbirth from her womb and the children she bears. For in her dire need she intends to eat them secretly because of suffering. your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of your cities. Wow. Deuteronomy 28, verses 56 and 57. You know, if you're trusting in wealth, gold, and silver, or fancy objects, then your trust is in vain. Weep and wail because of a misery that is coming upon you. Instead, be secure in the joyous covering of Christ and the hope of a rapture of the saints. Those left behind will face unimaginable sorrow. Verse 2 says, your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. You know, James really goes on the attack against worldly wealth. The very thing most people treasure above all else is the thing that's most fleeting. Just ask Mike Tyson. During his boxing career, it's estimated that he made over $200 million. However, after a few years, he was looking for food in dumpsters. Obviously, he wasn't very prudent about how he handled his assets, but even those who are exceptionally careful or watchful over large accumulations of wealth have later decided that a dive from a 14th floor was preferable to being poor. We simply can't rely on money as a good indicator of what our status will be in 24 hours. Likewise, James mentions moths eating our clothes. To understand this properly, take this in the context of the times. Paul, when writing to Timothy, said, when you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas. You know, he made this request because clothing was exceptionally valuable in ancient times, and many people had a single outfit to wear. You know, those who had more were considered wealthy. To flaunt flashy outfits was similar to flaunting lots of money and showed an arrogance which unfortunately hasn't changed, even in today's culture. Instead, we put value in labels and designers. To wear something by a noted designer often leads to feelings of superiority over others. But James states that this type of attitude is shallow and reflects poor priorities. Instead of trusting in money or fancy clothing, let us trust wholeheartedly in the Lord, the everlasting God. You know, your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. That's verse 3 of chapter 5. Imagine the final moments of the victims of a volcano at Pompeii. The volcano exploded and the fire and the ash came at the people like a freight train. The wealthy, along with the poor, were snuffed out with a few seconds. You know, that moment in time is recorded for the ages. People grasping their children, people dying in their rooms, people holding on to their gold. The last moments of many people's lives are spent grasping for something they simply can't take with them. You know, certainly the case that if some had not tried to hold on to their money, they may have escaped with their lives. But as Forrest Gump correctly put it, stupid is as stupid does. You know, people trust in wealth. They boast about wealth and they die because of their wealth. In the end, it did them no good at all. A few moments of history spent in leisure and ended in futility. Solomon speaks about the life of a laborer and the life of a rich. Really, which has it better? The man who sleeps well, even if he's a little hungry, or the man who can't sleep, though he's filled with cake and ice cream? The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of a rich will not permit him to sleep. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun. Riches kept for their owner to his hurt. Ecclesiastes 5, verses 12 and 13. Wealth, fancy living, gold, silver, flashy cars, and a life of leisure will testify against us when it's our hope. There's nothing wrong, okay, with wealth and abundance as long as it's kept in proper perspective. But when it consumes our lives, it becomes sin to us. Let's be careful where we put our hopes and what we're reaching for as we head into eternity. Where is your anchor at the day of your death? Let it be in the Christ Jesus alone. Verse 4 says, "Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty." James lived in a time when almost all work was physical, and a large percentage of that was agrarian. In fact, throughout its pages, the Bible deals with agricultural themes to make spiritual applications. When Jesus speaks of the wheat harvest, he's referring to the harvest of human souls prepared for the kingdom. When we read of a grape harvest, it's referring to God's wrath being poured out as if he stomps them in his fury. Today's verse isn't necessarily spiritual in nature, and we need to be careful not to over-spiritualize every verse. Rather, James is following along in the same line he's spoken of for the past few verses, greed. Instead of paying the workers their wages, the wealthy were holding on to their money longer than necessary. Perhaps they were saying to the workers, "I'll pay you when you finish your job." However, just like today, the common people relied on having their pay immediately. To withhold the day's wages was deprive them of their evening meal. Imagine if your boss originally promised to give you a paycheck each Friday, but later came on payday and said it would be bi-weekly. At the end of the second week, he comes again and says, "I'm going to give you one big check at the end of the month." You'd rightfully be very upset as you agreed to work for a weekly paycheck. James says that conducting affairs in such a manner is sin. If you're in a position of handling other people's pay, make sure you deal fairly with them, lest you be found a sinner as well. Do not take advantage of a hired worker who is poor and needy. Whether that worker is a fellow Israelite or a foreigner residing in one of your towns, pay them their wages each day before sunset, because they are poor and are counting on it. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Deuteronomy 24, verses 14 and 15. Verse 5 of James chapter 5 reads, "You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter." James reaches back to the Song of Moses for the thought he presents to us today. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, you grew thick. You are a beast. Then he forsook God who made him, and scornfully esteemed the rock of his salvation. Deuteronomy 32:15. James is writing to the first century Jewish community and reminding them of a fulfillment of what was prophesied by Moses. Don't miss the significance of the greater picture, though. Just as the Jewish people had become well-fed and fat, and just as they had kicked, so have the nations that once followed the Lord. As prosperity comes, so along with it comes ease and a dulling of the senses concerning the things of God. So it is in America today, as prosperity, luxury, and self-indulgence have become a way of life. In equal measure have come immorality, turning from the truth of the Bible and a more liberal approach to life, politics, and friendships. Hard work is no longer rewarded, but instead is taxed to feed the lazy. National feelings of devotion are replaced with a desire to burn the flag and to complain about even the thought of defending against aggression. Murderers are given light sentences, and abortionists are given honors and accolades. Likewise, preachers water down the truth of the Scripture and breathe out easy messages of prosperity and comfort. Surely we have fattened ourselves in the day of slaughter. We must repent and turn back to God, or we will be consumed in our unrighteousness. Please take time to pray for repentance and revival in our land today. James 5:6 says, "You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you." You know, James is speaking against the rich and those who oppress others. They've withheld the wages of those around them, have lived in luxury, and have grown fat, while others have been deprived. Today he accuses them of condemning and murdering the innocent in their race to the top of this mountain of greed. It's easy for us to look at the oppressors of the world and to judge them for their actions. But in the end, doesn't today's verse also point back to us? Each of us has participated in the crucifixion of Christ. It is our sin, our greed, and our wayward lives which necessitated his cross. In the movie The Passion of Christ, there's a short clip of a Roman soldier's hand bringing the hammer down on the nail which was piercing Jesus' hand. During the shooting of the film, Mel Gibson stepped out of the background, grabbed the hammer, and the shot was filmed with his hand as a Roman soldier. He said that his life made him a participant in the death of Jesus, and this was his way of acknowledging that. As troubling as it may seem, we have condemned and murdered the innocent one, Jesus, our Lord. You know, may we look with horror on the sin in our lives which brought about such a terrible demonstration of its penalty. Likewise, may we look with gratitude to our Heavenly Father, who loved us enough to offer his Son in our place. Jesus took our stripes, our mocking, and our cross. And after the turmoil of his soul, he saw the light of life. Having prevailed over death, it is with grateful hearts that we can anticipate freedom from the bonds of death as well. The murdered, innocent one has prevailed. Verse 7 says, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains." You know, compared to the Old Testament, there's not a great deal of predictive prophecy in the New. Most of it comes from Jesus' words and from the book of Revelation. Along with these, there are a few passages in Acts and the epistles which tell us about coming events. For the most part, James is not a book of prophecy, but today's verse very well may be an indication of when the Lord's coming is drawing near. You know, James tells his readers to be patient until the Lord's coming. He then tells us that just as the farmer waits for his crops, we also should wait. The crops will be ready when they're ready and not a moment sooner. Likewise, we need to be patient because Jesus isn't going to return when we want, but only when the time of harvest has come. Next, James says that the farmer waits patiently for the autumn and the spring rains. Could this be referring to the rains in the land of Israel? When the Romans destroyed Israel and exiled her people, they cut down all the trees in the land for building siege works. This changed the climate, and only sparse rain came each year for the past 2,000 years. However, since the Jewish people have returned to the land, they've drained the swamps, cleared the land, and planted millions of trees. Because of this, The land now receives both the autumn and spring rains once again. Is this an indication that Jesus also will be coming soon? If you want to know the times, there's no better place to look than look to the land of Israel. As events there unfold, the stage is again being set for the people to take a prominent position in world events, culminating in a rebuilt temple, 7 years of tribulation on earth, and climaxing in the glorious return of Jesus. Before these things happen, though, the rapture will occur. Are you ready? Jesus is coming. That's going to be the end of today's telecast. Until the next time, may God bless you and keep you. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Timothy, Senior Ministry Leader, inviting you to learn more about us. Our message is that the Lord Jesus Christ is mankind's only true hope. Now, what makes True Hope Ministries somewhat unique is our mission, which is to help you do what God has called you to do. Each member of True Hope shares in this commitment of helping one another in their respective endeavors of what God has called them to do. Now, beyond what's typically offered by ministry fellowships, the greatest resource of True Hope Ministries is what we call ministry companionship. Now, ministry companionship is simply the members of True Hope Ministries investing in the success of each other within our fellowship. Plus, we encourage our ministers to also meet opportunities to invest into the success of other ministers in their local church communities. Ministry companionship is based on two primary principles. First, that by the Lord's giftings and our own ministry experiences, each of us holds pieces for the success of others in ministry. And second, those ordained in ministry service, especially leadership in ministry, should not mean becoming spiritually and emotionally isolated. Yet so many in ministry suffer from this very malady. As adverse conditions, even aggressive actions against the church increasingly develop in America, ministry servants and leaders of ministry cannot afford to be without genuine ministry companions. If you or someone you know in ministry sees the need for ministry companionship, please visit our website. And we'd be so glad to talk with you, so give us a call. The call is toll free, and if I can't answer your call at the moment, please leave a message, because I promise I'll return your call just as soon as I can, because I really do look forward to helping you do what God has called you to do.